Good afternoon. Good to see everyone back here. It's another week. I feel like these come really fast now. It's Monday morning. Here we are again.
24 weeks into this.
Yeah, which means we're 2 weeks away from halfway.
This is crazy.
So we're flying
Feels
through.
like we just started them.
I know it does. That was way back in the summer, and it's snowing outside. Well, it's not snowing outside, but there's
snow
snow outside. It's cold. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving next week, so it's just that time of year. But we're back into it, and we're back into the Old Testament. We spent a fun week with Ephesians last week. Now this week we're back into the story of now the Kings.
Yes,
and
picking up the story after David.
So week 24, what's on the docket?
It is Psalm 70 to 72, Proverbs 5 through 8, and 1 Kings 5 through 18. So we're not quite going to finish reading 1 Kings, but we're going to talk about all of 1 Kings today.
So good, because we'll have next week we'll do a special episode with folks in the book of Proverbs. Yep. So this week we'll just march through all of 1 Kings. There's a lot to cover, but what sticks out to you about the book of 1 Kings?
Well, to me, there's kind of like three main parts of it. I mean, there's other little stuff, but you get the story of Solomon, which everyone kind of knows who Solomon is, wise king, apparently.
Right.
And then there's Solomon's son loses the kingdom, it splits. Then there's Rehoboam and Jeroboam,
right?
Which I can never remember. I always have to think which one is which, whether the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, because their names sound so the same. And then you get the Ahab and who's the king of Israel, and then Elijah the prophet during the latter part of it.
Right.
And Elijah, everyone knows too, because Elijah showed up on the Mountain of Transfiguration. And
yeah, so we'll see him come into the picture here, and his story will finish in 2 Kings. That's kind of the big motions. I always remember Jeroboam being the northern kingdom, because later on, the kingdom of Israel had Jeroboam the second. So there's two Jeroboams.
That's not going to help me.
And the Jeroboam the second actually reigns, I think, for like 52, 42 years. It's a really long time that he reigns.
Is he a good king then?
In terms of political power, he's a good worldly king, but he's not a good God's king kind of thing for God's people.
Because usually they reign longer if they're actually a good king.
He does have a very stable reign, because I think it's probably the best time that Israel's going to have from Solomon to Jeroboam II. So it's during good times, but that's when we get most of the prophets too, like your Old Testament prophets, like Amos and things like that. A lot of them take place during that very popular time frame of Jeroboam II's reign, when times are good, but the people of Israel are very corrupt. Which is kind of the main thrust. So, we've been tracking, if you kind of follow the Old Testament story so far, right? He made promises to the patriarchs. He brought the people of Israel, fulfilled those promises, brought them into this good and beautiful land. Moses had set a cross for them, saying, hey, if you're going to live long in this land, if you're going to prosper, here's the ways of God. Do them. If you do them, you will be blessed, and it will go well with you. If you don't do them, it will not go well with you, and God will vomit you out of the land. And, kind of left it up there with Moses, and we tracked through Joshua and how things were good during Joshua. Right? The people actually did what they're supposed to. And then the judges, right, we saw that turn downhill. And then we saw the book of Samuel as it transitions from the tribes into a monarchy, from Saul to David, and we tracked, that's what those books are about. And we see you're thinking, okay, now things are solid, things are kind of in good standing, maybe things are going to improve. And then we come to the book of 1 Kings, where it all just
falls apart.
Bottoms out. Yeah.
David's like the good king.
Yeah.
And then Solomon starts out okay, and then goes downhill really quickly. Even though he's supposed to be wise.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is going to be kind of hard. So this is kind of a heartbreaking, tragic situation that's going to play out here for the book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings. And even, with David at the beginning, we'll have some shocking words from David at the beginning that set the tone for the book. King David seems to be bitter. He's unaware. He's old, so his mind is kind of lost him. So he's like, what? He's being played by his Bathsheba and other people around him, and he's just so you kind of wonder, okay, things are not good with David. We're seeing where this human king is going to get them. And Solomon, he starts off good, but he turns sour. And then we're going to see how king after king after king gets kind of worse and worse. It's just it's spiraling downhill.
Because, what is it? In the northern kingdom, there's no good kings?
There's no good kings at all.
Maybe semi-one, wasn't there?
Not a single one,
Not a single
actually.
one.
Yeah.
And then the southern kingdom has a handful of good kings, but most of them, actually, one of the good kings is the last king, actually, before they, well, the second to last, I guess, before
Josiah
they
there, yeah.
But
yeah, because that's all in Second Kings there too. When we'll get to the good kings, but everyone's going to be evaluated based on David. So David was kind of the example here. He's kind of the type of Christ who's to come, even though he had failings. But he's kind of held up as this is kind of what you want to emulate. And so you get like how all of David's sons are going to be emulated. Well, they did maybe good here, but not like David, their father, or they were not David, their father.
That's where you get the repeated phrase if they did evil in the eyes of the Lord or they did good in the eyes of the Lord, except that they kept the high places or continued offering sacrifices or didn't get rid of the male prostitutes or whatever.
Yeah. And you'll see with the northern kingdom, it's almost the exact opposite. They get compared like Jeroboam. They were just like Jeroboam, and we'll find out he set up the cult shrines and the false priesthood, and it's just a mess. So all these kings get evaluated. And when we do evaluations, you're thinking, okay, did they, were they made the kingdom secure? Were they a good ruler? Were they, this and that? Were they good in military battles? Did they win great victories? But
in here, it's how well they follow the word of God.
Yeah, how faithful were they? That's kind of how these kings are, which is a good reminder for us too. Like when God is looking, when the scriptures evaluate us, it's giving more about how faithful are they keeping with God.
It's not necessarily things. We're actually going pretty well
in certain times. Yeah,
in certain times in Israel, but they were going well, but according to God, they weren't.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
God had different eyes to see. So even when they're like rich, like the prophet Amos, they're rich, they're well off, they're secure, and he's like, you guys are sitting on a bunch of corpses. Your success and your money is coming off of the backs of the poor. It's hurting others. You're murdering to steal, to covet, to get their stuff. And he's like, and you guys think this is fine. So times might be good, but boy, is there a lot of blood happening in the background. And then on top of that, they've forsaken their God who brought them out of Egypt, and instead they're worshiping all these other gods. So this is kind of like, this is kind of the summary of what we're going to hear today. But as we kind of plow through the opening chapter, so 1 Kings chapter 1, what sticks out to you? Who do we meet again here? Who starts us off?
Well, David is old and advanced in years. So basically he can't keep warm when they bring him a beautiful woman to keep him warm, basically. Which he had tons of wives and stuff, so I still don't understand that. But anyway.
Well, and part of it makes you think, because this happens later on when, is it who is
Adoniah?
Adoniah, yeah. Because he wants to try to maybe get some legitimacy, and this is someone who's was with David, so having Abishag as his wife would kind of make him look like the people like, oh hey, he has like legitimate kingship authority, and so maybe this is something that's set up by some of these people too to kind of entrap David and bring a successor, stuff like that.
Because the first couple chapters here basically are Solomon, who's going to take over as heir, and it's supposed to be Solomon, which, do we get that promise made to Bathsheba about Solomon becoming king, or is this the first time it's mentioned?
I think it's the first time that's
okay, because I don't remember reading it in 2 Samuel at all, and so anyway, so basically, apparently King David has promised Solomon is going to be king, but one of his other sons, Adoniah, who is the eldest now, after Absalom died, would it be?
Yeah.
Expects to take over, and so he starts setting himself up as if he's going to take over, and there's the whole political intrigue around all this.
We're back, which, if you got to think of it, if everyone knows what God promised to David, right, your son, a son of David, is going to sit in the throne. So this is kind of like a coveted title. So everyone wants the next, who's going to be the next son? Bathsheba wants her son to be, in fact, David, you promise, Adonai here, he wants it because, this is kind of a prestigious situation. So here we get this kind of idea that, these are worldly kings, right? They want the power and the prestige and the name that come with it. So David here, they're trying to figure out who's going to take up next. Nathan the prophet, who we remember from 2 Samuel, Bathsheba, they're saying Solomon needs to be the guy. You have very other familiar names like Joab, some of the priests and things like that. They side with Adonai. I mess up the names too. Mess up with these names.
I think it's Adoniah.
Yeah.
You have to look at it every time you say it.
Right. And so they side with him, and there's kind of like this butting of heads. David gives legitimacy, though, to Solomon. So he has him, sit on my donkey. ride through the towns, proclaim before him that this is who's going to sit on the throne after me. So King David here, sets up his son Solomon as king. And Solomon would have been, we're told 40, I think, is when he begins his reign. So he's 40 years old, and everyone gets all freaked out who are with Adoniah here, because they're sitting there like, we just sided with the wrong guy. And back in the old, we're not used to this now, but even through medieval times, if you sided with the wrong king, like, it could be your head, because now all of a sudden your loyalty is suspect. Are you actually going to follow? Are you just lip serving? Or are you just seeking your advantage? And so a lot of the times, if you kind of sided with the wrong king, you could expect to be killed too. If your political wing didn't get, it'd be like today in our elections, back when last year's elections and everything, with that with Joe Biden getting to be president, right? And it'd be like all of a sudden all of Trump supporters were killed off. Like, that's kind of what would happen in the ancient world. You kill off all the core supporters. It's just kind of talk about political intrigue. That's kind of how the ancient world worked. So they're all freaked out, and they all come. We're even told Adoniah here he's sitting there at the horns of the altar, right? And that's kind of how you beg for mercy, is you kind of hold on, because you wouldn't kill people there, because it's a holy spot. So you wouldn't bloodlet there. And so he's kind of grasping on, like, please don't kill me. And Solomon shows mercy, right? It's like, well, if you're not suspect, then I will not kill you.
Which later Adoniah tries to steal the throne again, basically. He's shown mercy, and then he tries to steal the throne again. And then he gets killed.
He's looking for an opportunity to rule. So,
but in the meantime, between those two things,
we get David's final instructions to Solomon, and I always love this.
He's gotten bitter.
He is kind of a bitter guy. He's reflecting back in his life, and he sees the things that he said and done, and he's telling Solomon what he should do. Things to watch out for as king, because there's always someone that's after you. Have you ever heard of the Greek legend Damocles' sword?
That sounds familiar.
There was a king, and there's a slave, and he's like, I wish I could be king. I look at your life, it's kind of like the swap here. Being a king would be great. You have all these servants, you get all the money, it's just a great life. And the king's like, fine, you can be king for the next day. So they swap places, kind of thing. Well, what the king does is, above the servant's, now the king's head, he puts a sword that's hanging by a thread. And so he's always like looking out to see if the sword's going to snap and fall and kill him.
I've heard that story.
And so the king he's trying to make a point, like, you always have to watch your back as king, because there's always someone who wants your position. There's always someone who wants to bring you down. There's always someone trying to assassinate you, or defame you, or you have to make a decision, and that decision is going to hurt people and help people, and the people who are hurt can be really mad. And so he's kind of like, do you really want it? At the end of the day, the servant gives up. He's like, I don't want this. I'd rather be a slave than to deal with this. And king's like, yep, not everyone should be king, and or deal with that. So here you get that David's kind of making that same thing to Solomon, saying, there's a lot of things you're going to have to do as king.
And he also tells him to
murder some people.
Murder a few people.
So listen to God, right? He tells him, like, everyone so far, Joshua, when he's dying, make sure you follow the laws of God. Moses, make sure you follow the laws of God. David, make sure you follow the laws of God.
And also
kill these people. Kill this guy,
none of these
kill
people,
that guy.
Solomon, directly, it's not like he goes out immediately and executes them.
Right.
It kind of works out in the course of
events here. And I love it too, because when the one guy, right, that guy laughed and cursed me as I was leaving town, and I promised I wouldn't kill him, Solomon, but you didn't, so you can take care of him. So you just, David's final words, which are kind of shocking, right? It seems that even David in his old age there's a problem with David too, and we're going to see it in all of his sons. So David then finally sleeps with his fathers, and he's buried. We get to the reign, how long he reigns for.
40 years.
And then Solomon, he is established. So Solomon was, we're told, he's 40 years old and he reigns, 41 or something like that. So Solomon was very young, when everything was going down here. So...
can't be quite 40 because David only reigned 40 years, but...
Right. So I have to look that up. I feel like his age is given at some point. We were told when he starts to reign.
I was thinking it was 20, but I could be wrong about that too.
Let me see. It's probably in here somewhere real quick if we're looking it up here. King,
Probably one of those
temple. Right, one of those random verses.
Where it's like, and Solomon reigned, this became king at this age and reigned this long, and
right.
Anyway.
It'll be something that hits us
probably
here.
Something we'll probably come across. It's probably something during the building of the temple or something.
Probably. All right. Yeah, well, back at it. Solomon is established as king. It's going well. Those people that David says to kill, as you said, it does kind of work out. One of them skips town.
Wasn't it Joab that he actually does get struck down even though he's clinging to the horns of the altar?
Yeah, so this mercy is not shown.
Because he has himself shed blood.
Yeah.
Innocent blood.
Yep, so Joab's evil finally catches up to him. Remember, he murdered people. He murdered Abner. And then when there was the commander that David had set up to be commander-in-chief, Joab gets jealous, and so he meets him out in the field, and actually it's kind of reading just like Cain and Abel. He meets him out in the field and kills him, and so everyone stops like, whoa, holy cow, right? Joab just did this. So Joab meets his own unfortunate end here as he's been killed. You get the others, Shimei here. He's also killed when he leaves town, and he rejects that mercy too that Solomon had given. And so finally, all of Solomon's enemies are put away. Anyone who could be a threat to Solomon, a rival, or could unseat him, they're taken care of. And so Solomon kind of is set up as king. There's no problems here.
And then he makes his first mistake by getting married to the daughter of the Pharaoh in Egypt.
Which is probably a good time. You had the Deuteronomy 17 up, right?
Oh, yes.
So back in the days of Moses, right before the people go into the land, Moses assumes that they're going to have a king one day. And so he sets up some laws. So what were the laws for the kings?
Let's see, where it is. Okay. You'll set up a king. Don't put a foreigner over you who's not your brother. And then it says, only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. Since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away, nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold. And the rest of that we can get into when we get to the end of 2 Kings, because the rest of it becomes more important later.
But you kind of keep that in mind with Solomon here, where God had instructed the kings of old, right, not to have a powerful military, don't get too much wealth, don't go back to Egypt. And
the first thing he does is make a marriage alliance with Egypt, where he does get horses from.
Yeah. And so here we're just like, we're kind of seeing where this is going to go a little bit. But, Solomon does start off well here, because God appears to him, right? Solomon loves the Lord. He's walking in the statutes of David, his father. Only he sacrificed and made offerings at the high places, right? So he's not worshiping the one spot yet. But we do have that the Lord appears to him. And of course, this is a famous Sunday school lesson.
Yep.
What does God appears and says, hey, what do you want? Well, that's kind of a cool thing for God to say, right? What do you want? I'll give it to you. And what does Solomon ask for?
He asks for wisdom, basically, to govern wisely.
Which is a wonderful thing to ask for, right? He gets it. And this becomes, Solomon is called the father of the wisdom literature. We're going to talk about Proverbs next week.
Ecclesiastes too.
Yep.
And Song of Songs.
Right. They're all kind of written by him. We're told that he writes, 1,005 Proverbs and music. So he's a big
all of
musician
Proverbs
too.
Is actually his. Some of it is other people too, because it actually says in Proverbs this is
who wrote this.
Yeah. But a lot of it is believed to be actually Solomon.
Right. So Solomon is a wise guy. Right. He does a lot of fair and just rulings. His fame spreads with the world. We're going to find out. Solomon prays for this wisdom to discern between good and evil, to govern God's people, which is a wise thing to ask. And it pleases God, and says, because you've asked for this, I will also give you what you haven't asked for. I will give you, understanding. And what else? Riches, honor.
And he says, long life if he walks in my ways and God's ways.
Yeah.
Which he doesn't. Because he dies, I think, at the age of 60 or something.
He's young. Yeah. He's a young guy.
Compared to how long other people have lived. A lot of kings don't actually live very long.
No, they don't. So, he rules for 40 years, which that could have been 50 or 60 or 70, But, instead here, he will fall away. And so God, this is one of the ways that God actually cuts evil away. He put people to death. So God will remove evil from going as far as it could go by limiting it.
So so we get the Sunday school. This is often a Sunday school lesson, the Solomon's wisdom. This where the two prostitutes come and there's a dead baby and a live baby, and
Who's the mom?
Who's the mom? And he's like, let's cut the baby in half. And the real mother, is like, no, just give her the live baby, don't kill the baby. And this imagery is used. I think it was used in an episode of Recess once. Yeah. So anyway, it's one of those famous stories that you see popping up as a wise, illustration of a wise king.
Right. Which, you can see in Jesus then when people come to trap him with questions and things like how Jesus is able to work out. Right? It shows us that Jesus has wisdom and is able to discern things. He's able to discern people's hearts and intentions. So Solomon here figures out. Jesus is wisdom. Yeah.
We'll get to that next week.
We will. I love that. Cut the baby in half and give it to each of them, and beautiful because the real mom's like, I'd rather have her have my child than for my child to be dead, and then Solomon knows that. And, there's the real mom. Give it to her. So good. So we get an example of his wisdom that makes us kind of go, yeah, good, yeah, wonderful, Solomon, great.
And we get a whole bunch of stuff about his
officials
and his wealth and all that. What was it? His provisions for one day: 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fat oxen, and 20 pasture-fed cattle, 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fattened fowl. Yeah. So big household.
So Solomon has a lot of supplies.
40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots.
And a core here, because we're told that he one day he has 30 cores of fine flour and 60 cores of meal. A core is 6 bushels or 220 liters. So that's a lot. Talk about you're feeding thousands of people with that kind of stuff. We're told the size of his kingdom, which is this is the largest that the kingdom of Israel will ever be, is under Solomon. He rules from the Euphrates River. This is kind of where Babylon's at, all the way down pretty much to Egypt. So he kind of rules this kind of whole swath of territory, everywhere from Iraq and Iran today, all the way to Egypt. It's kind of the borders of his kingdom. There's the end of chapter 4, 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005, which we have one of them. So he wrote a lot more than what we have. Maybe two psalms. Two of the psalms are from him. Yeah, Psalm 127. And I forget the other psalm, but there's only 2 from Solomon.
We usually think of David as the psalm writer, but because a lot of the psalms are David's, but there are a lot of other people who wrote psalms. It's like their hymn book.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of our hymns are Luther. I don't know. Anyway, but there's also a lot of other hymn writers.
Right. Yeah, I think in the psalm, this is in the psalm book, but it's kind of relevant here. 73 of the psalms are written by David, at least belonging to him. So 2 are from Solomon, so pretty much half of them are from David that we know. Other ones are some anonymous. There's some, there's one from Moses. That's why it's called the David too. So the book of Psalms in the early church and in some of the Judaism is called the David. And when you're with the David, they're talking about the Psalms. So good. So he's a wise guy. He makes proverbs. We're told that the people of all the nations come to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. So Solomon has a lot of guests coming to see him because there's rumors going about, which is kind of what God said would happen for his people, right? That if you do well, if you're wise, people of all the world go, wow, look, they have no God like this God here. So Solomon does demonstrate this a little bit when things are working as well as they can in Israel.
So then we get into the temple building,
which is kind of the main core part of these 2 books here. Solomon gets a bunch of timber. He gets a lot of resources. He builds the temple. It's beautiful.
It's similar is it similar in dimensions to the tabernacle, but like twice the size? I think
it's bigger or something like that. Yeah.
It's like 2 or 3 times bigger than the tabernacle. But
Scales
same
put
dimensions.
Up. Right.
Same setup as you had in the tabernacle.
So I have my
impermanent.
I can show this here too on the screen. But you got your Holy of Holies, the holy place, and then the rooms that were like little office rooms and meeting room, treasury rooms, and things like that. So I'll put it up here so you can see as well, as everything falls out of my Bible. But so this is kind of what the temple would look like that Solomon built, and you got the Holy of Holies in there, the holy place, and then the courtyards and everything out here as well. So Solomon built a lot.
And it might be important to note at this point that this is not the temple that existed in Jesus' day.
No.
That was the third iteration.
Third temple, yeah.
So Solomon's is the first, and then a second one was built. We'll get to that in Nehemiah. Ezra's Judah.
Ezra and Nehemiah.
Nehemiah is the building of the temple. And then Herod expands it,
Yeah.
basically. It doesn't totally get torn down or rebuilt, but he expands it.
Right. So
And that's the temple that gets destroyed in 70 AD.
And that's Herod the Great, the very same Herod the Great who killed the children in Bethlehem after Jesus was born, built the temple that Jesus saw in his day. Because the temple that they build after the exile is really small. It's really pathetic. And Herod sees that, he's like, we could do much better than this. And he makes this grand, huge temple.
Because he was trying to make the Jews happy at the time, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Or something.
because he's trying to give legitimacy to his own reign.
Yeah.
And they'll love him if they build this
Anyway,
temple.
so this is not the temple that as you talked about in your sermon this week, with the temple
Right.
that the disciples were oohing and
Marveling
aahing
at.
at. That's Herod's temple, and that was a huge monstrosity.
Yeah. They were told, there's the labor that goes into it. We're told 30,000 men, to bring like the lumber and everything down.
I thought it interesting how the people were in shifts. They would spend a month cutting down the trees, and then 2 months at home.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting. So quarter of the year you're away.
Interesting details like that.
Yeah, random little details too. You're just like, what does that mean? But it's just kind of, but that gives more authenticity to it.
It's more evidence that this was written,
by people who saw it.
Yeah, saw it or had records of it, or
because who writes that kind? Right, if you were making this up, you wouldn't put that kind of a detail in. Because you wouldn't even think about that.
Yeah.
And so this tells you this was written by someone who had access to the exact. Okay, this is how they did it, or was there himself when they saw it happen.
Because we don't know. We never did talk about who wrote First Kings or.
Right. Yeah.
We don't really know, do we? It's a compilation of
different sources and
records
things like that.
And stuff, because it'll say after some of these kings and more stuff that happened during this reign are written about in the book of.
And I think, we can get into that too. I think if I have some thoughts, but the books of First and Second Chronicles actually reference First and Second Kings. It'll say as it is written in the book of Kings, and you're like, oh, this book. So the Chronicles actually uses Kings as a source in its writing, and that's post-exile. So whoever wrote First and Second Chronicles is after the exile, looking back at things, and they have the resource of First and Second Kings.
So First and Second Kings were probably written right at the beginning of the exile. Maybe it was a try to remember their history as they're going into the exile. And this is how we got here.
Right. Yeah. Court records and things like that. So some people may even say like Jeremiah may have written some of it too, as he's kind of recording things down because he survives the exile. He sees it. He's an eyewitness of the exile. We have some candidates for that. So Solomon here builds the temple, and this is, God has finally picked his spot. The entire Old Testament so far with Moses and everything, God said, I'm going to pick a spot to dwell forever.
And this is the spot.
And here's the spot. Solomon builds this temple. It takes 20 years, I do think, to build it.
Wasn't it? I thought it was 7 years and then 14 years.
Oh, that's right. And 20 years altogether to build everything.
Because it takes twice as long for Solomon to build his house than it does to build the
so
temple.
There it is, 13 years. It takes 7 years to build the temple.
Yeah.
Which
granted, a temple's probably simpler to build than a house, but anyway.
And if you think back, and this gets into the design of the temple too, he completes it in 7 years. You can think of how he made the heavens and the earth in 7 days. Solomon here completes the temple in 7 years. And it's kind of and inside the temple are images of Eden. And so the pomegranate trees. And so it looks like paradise. So what God has them build in the temple as he did in the tabernacle is that it looks like Eden. So when you go in and you're looking at the temple, this is Eden. And you think back to Eden as where God dwelt with man and there's peace.
What if a pomegranate was the forbidden fruit?
Maybe. Makes you wonder. And pomegranates are not really good fruits to eat anyway. So I had one a few months ago and I was like, this is a pomegranate. And so you see this kind of, which tells you that the priests and the temple are supposed to be like Adam and Eve, who are supposed to care for the creation because the creation's God's temple. And so here you get this kind of imagery is playing out in the temple too. And just kind of a little interesting tidbit if you're kind of paying attention. Because the tabernacle was also built over the series of 7 speeches. So creation was built in 7 days. The tabernacle is built over the course of 7 speeches. And the temple is, of course, is 7 years. So there's kind of like an echo.
7 is one of the big numbers in the Bible, too.
Right. It's a number for God, for holiness. So it's just kind of, if you're stopping and you're paying attention to this stuff, it also you're like, wait a minute, I'm hearing an echo here. And you're right. This is the echo of creation. This is an echo of the tabernacle. This is an echo of God's presence and being with his people. Yeah, and so you get all that, completes it, and then he takes 13 years to build his own house.
Yep.
And we're not told the exact length, so we don't know exactly what it looks like, but there's different rooms and different purposes for the rooms. He's getting all of his furnishings for the temple, everything that's constructed in it. So chapter 7 deals with everything that's kind of inside, the decorations of the temple, what's inside, and very, very costly. Everything's overlaid with gold. Everything's, there's wood. Good wood too. In fact, there's wood that's never been seen like it before.
Was it the amalgam wood or something that we don't actually know what it is?
Yeah, we have no idea what that looks like. But some pretty sturdy stuff here, and some good architecture. You're used to thinking that the ancients as people who, they live in mud huts and things like that. But no, these people know how to build stuff.
They knew how to build without all the stuff we have now to build.
Right. And
they built it to last.
And in fact, this is the Romans. I guess they had we don't know what it is exactly, but they had a formula for something like we have cement-wise, but it actually lasts longer. Like we still have examples of it around. It hasn't cracked.
That'd be nice.
Right. So apparently they had some materials that we don't even have now. It's kind of interesting.
People were smarter back then.
They could figure stuff out.
Effects of the curse. That's an evolutionary idea. The idea that the ancients were less smart than us.
Yeah. You can see the Bible almost kind of trends the other way a little bit.
Yeah, things actually get worse because the curse compounds itself.
Well, I found when I was reading about the temple, how Herod built his temple, when they carved the limestone blocks, they were so big and heavy that they couldn't chisel underneath. So what they did is that they would kind of have little trenches around the block, and they would put water there, and the water would cause the limestone to erode and finally crack, and then you could push it off. And so I'm just like who had time to sit there and that's brilliant. Yeah. And so they knew how to do this kind of stuff.
I think they were more patient than us too.
Yeah, that's true too.
Anyway, so we got all the description. Speaking of patience, reading through the descriptions.
Yeah, and I love it. There's so much bronze. There's so much materials that they don't. If the carpenter, the person who's making the temple, doesn't even bother to weigh everything because there's just so much. And so we're told at the end of chapter 7. Thus, all the work that Solomon did on the house of the Lord was finished, which is an echo to creation again, that God finished all that he made in the days of creation. And Solomon brought in the things that David his father had dedicated, all the gold, the silver, the vessels, and he stores them in the treasuries. And so finally, the ark, last but not least, the ark is assembled.
Traveling around all of 1st and 2nd Samuel.
Yeah.
It's settled in a few places, but...
And now it finally has a home in the temple.
And the glory of the Lord fills the house.
Just like it did the tabernacle. And you think when Moses built the tabernacle, no one could come near it, not even Moses himself. And here, the same thing happens. And this is God's presence. He is there, which he promised that he would be. There's, and if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, or if it's coming up here soon, but all there, Solomon sacrifices at the temple.
Oh, yeah, crazy amount.
So, Solomon blesses the Lord. He gives if you want to know kind of how to read the Old Testament, chapter 8, verses 12 and following are kind of Solomon summarizing the story thus far, saying, here's what you've done for us as your people, and here we are now today. You made these promises, and now it's being fulfilled. And then he makes a prayer of dedication. And Solomon says a lot of things in this prayer of dedication in chapter 8. Is there anything that kind of sticks out to you about this?
The part about foreigners, where, because, he's listing, if your people are here, your people are there, if they pray towards the temple, hear them. And then he says, likewise, when a foreigner who is not of your people Israel comes from a far country for your name's sake, for they shall hear of your great name and your mighty hand and of your outstretched arm. When he comes and prays towards this house, hear in heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all for which the foreigner calls to you, in order that all the people of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and that they may know that this house that I have built is called by your name.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of the indications we get in the Old Testament that God isn't just for the Israelites.
It's for all people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this temple is for them to all come to and see God. And to hear God, for God to hear their petitions and act on for them too. This is why Jesus partly says, my house should be called a house of prayer, because it's being connected here at what Solomon's praying about, what people are going to pray for in his temple and ask for, and that God's going to be here and he's going to hear them. So this is a great promise that God's making about this temple here. And of course, this is the church. So if you're reading Old Testament theology, this carries into the New Testament with God's people. We are now his church. So if you want to apply this to us, you can say, as God's people now, we are his body, his temple, these are living stones. And then this is how we should see ourselves, as a place that people come to for prayer, that we will pray for them. And God hears our prayers because we're his people and we're his temple. So kind of a beautiful thing here. Solomon gives a benediction, blesses, what's going to happen in this place for the people. And then
he also talks about an exile too.
Oh, yeah.
Before we skip ahead, get
Good.
too far ahead.
Yeah, catch up on that there. What do you see?
Yeah, one of his last petitions here is when your people, if your people sin and you're angry with them, and you give them to your enemy, and they are carried away captive to the land of the enemy, far off or near. When they turn their heart in the land to that which have. Okay, I can't. This is very wordy prayer.
It is.
Basically, if they repent and pray towards and turn their hearts back towards the temple,
God will hear.
Yeah, God will hear. Which they do go into exile, so it's interesting.
And so this gives us, maybe Solomon's prayer here would give us a foreshadowing for how the people of Israel are going to survive the exile. Yeah. That there will come a time when they are away from the land, but yet even in that faraway land, if they turn back to the Lord, they'll come back. Right, and it's gone. There'll still be a way, and the prophet Ezekiel will get into that, because God leaves the temple, and he kind of takes like this mobile temple around.
He goes back to the ark kind of mobility.
Kind of, yeah. God kind of has this idea that his temple is not something that's set in stone and in one place, but it's kind of be on the move, which we as the Christian church are. We're in every location in the globe now. God's temple is literally spreading out throughout the whole globe, which is kind of a cool thought.
Which is where we get is it in Ezekiel where all the people will flood, or is it in Revelations where all the people will come to the temple?
Yeah.
Okay, both. Yeah, Ezekiel and Revelation have a lot in common.
Zechariah, Isaiah says this too.
Heading to the temple, people, there's the doomsday type people who will think, everyone's going to flood to Israel, and it's not Israel, because that's not where the temple is.
Yeah.
The temple isn't there at all anymore.
Right.
And so that's the church. It's not a physical location. Right.
It's not spread out, right? So here's the church right here. The Christ Lutheran Church here in Marshfield is where God's people are. You can get across the world wherever Christians are gathering around God's word and receiving his gifts. There's the temple. And so it's kind of cool, this thought that we're God's retaking his creation as his temple. We're spreading out throughout the whole world, which is what God told Adam and Eve, right? Go throughout all creation, spread out. Here's what we're doing too. Yes. So cool stuff.
Anyway, I suppose we should keep pushing forward, otherwise we're not going to get to Jeroboam or Ahab
or anyone. We're stuck on Solomon. So you got all the sacrifices, 140,000. It talks about how much this was dedicated for. God appears to Solomon again. And so God's appeared to him twice now, kind of this physical manner here. Kind of says, "This house you've built, I will certainly bless it. I'm going to put my name there if you stick to my word and stick to the covenant." And then we're getting told of Solomon's other acts, what he did, who he's in charge of, the amount of gold, which go back to Deuteronomy 17, right? All the gold that they're collecting is so much gold, which is between us today.
This is our Bethlehem Walk gold.
Yeah, so Solomon collects so much gold that we're told that silver is useless.
Yep.
And as people would pick up silver and be like, I got some of that at home. So that's just how common it is. He builds all this stuff. We're told the queen of Sheba comes. We're not exactly sure where this is.
Now, some people think it's what it was, which Pharaoh in Egypt. I can't think of it.
I can't get it.
Anyway, sometimes people think that. Some people think it might be like Arabia or something.
Right.
Anyway.
Far off in India or something like that too.
So Solomon has a ton of wealth.
We're told 666 talents of gold there, which talk about the god of Mammon here, and kind of that 666 number there. Yeah. Which a talent is 75 pounds. I don't know if you time 666 times by 75, that tells you that's a lot of gold right there. All his shields he puts up, he's excelled in all the kings. Everything is fantastic. He's acquiring all these chariots and military power, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no. Deuteronomy 17, right? He's acquiring all this wealth and all this military. He's becoming just like a king like all the other nations.
And then there's the awkward 700 wives and 300 concubines.
1,000 women.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which a lot of this was probably like political alliances, because that's
Yeah.
that's what a marriage was. A lot
Right.
of times for a king was political alliances. So, oh, we want an alliance with you, so send me one of your daughters.
Powerful.
and-
We'll marry our daughter off to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Anyway.
he loves many foreign women. And we're told the Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, Hittite, all the
people you shouldn't. Yeah.
from all the nations concerning which the Lord had said to his people, you shall not enter into marriage with them. So we're told right away, because some people are like, he took 1,000 women, and well, didn't God not, it doesn't like that? And it's like, well, yeah, we're told right here that God said not to do this.
And the Lord was angry with Solomon.
Yep. So verse 9, God's angry because, his heart turns away from the Lord, because all the foreign women, they're like, we worship these gods. Can we have temples and places of worship for them? And Solomon's like, yeah, sure, why not? In fact, put them in the temple too.
And then we get to the next few verses are basically about what happens in the rest of Kings.
Yep.
And basically the kingdom's going to be taken from Solomon, except for really in two tribes, it's Judah and Benjamin, right?
Yeah.
They keep saying one tribe, but
Simeon,
Judah's
Simeon.
like Simeon. Oh yeah,
Yep.
Simeon was absorbed into.
Yep, Judah.
Yeah.
So they're all surrounded there.
Um,
So Solomon's heart turns away from God. God becomes upset. And so God raises up, like the judges, he raises up adversaries against Solomon to be a thorn in Solomon's side.
Jeroboam.
And one of them is a man named Jeroboam, who's an Ephraimite, so from the tribe of Ephraim. And then one day he's walking along and he finds a prophet. And the prophet comes to him and takes his new garment, this whole garment, and he rips up into 12 pieces and says, take 10 of them, because the Lord is going to make you king over the rest of Israel. But God made a promise to David that he would never lack a son on the throne. So Judah's going to stay with David, but Jeroboam's going to get everything else. And so here we get the split of the kingdom. And so Solomon does finally die.
Yeah.
And
Rehoboam, his son, takes over. And then
and-
Rehoboam screws up by taking bad advice.
And unfortunately, unlike Solomon, who is wise, Rehoboam's a fool.
And
And
instead of giving mercy to the people or lightening their load, he's like, nope, I'm going to be
just like Pharaoh.
a hard king, and
Yeah.
that causes the other tribes to abandon him.
We're done with you. Yeah.
And the kingdoms divide.
So we get, and this is where we get in the in the Old Testament, the talk of the northern kingdom of Israel, which is the 10 tribes under Jeroboam.
The 10 lost tribes.
The 10 lost tribes. And then the southern kingdom of Judah, which is under the sons of David.
So it also has other tribes kind of absorbed into it too,
Right.
as people escape Israel too. I think the Levites all
So
had that way and stuff,
a remnant
but-
kind of comes under here.
But Jeroboam screws up rather quickly too.
Very fast.
He sets up 2 golden calves.
Why
Where
does he
we
do
heard
that?
that?
Right. Why does he do that?
Because he doesn't want the people heading over to Jerusalem in Judah to worship God.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, here, you can worship these guys up here.
It's just as good.
Even though God promised him, these kingdoms, and so he shouldn't have been worried about that. But
Exactly. So he doesn't trust the promise that God gave, and so he sets up 2 golden. And Dan is in the far north. It's like probably as far north as you can go. And then Bethel, which that's been an important place in the Bible so far. It's where Jacob was at some points too. He sets up another one, which is in the southern part. So the northern part you can go worship, but the southern. So he makes it very convenient, right? Easier to go to. Just don't go to Jerusalem, because then you'll join the tribe of Judah again. And sets up the 2 golden calves, which become a snare.
I'm going to say this is later what often is referred to as Jeroboam's sin. Is the 2 calves generally.
Which sound, like you said, it sounds just like Aaron. When he made the golden calf there in the book of Exodus there. And he even says, behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. He says the same exact line. So you're just like, oh, this worked so well the first time when Aaron did it. It's going to work well here too. And then we're told he doesn't take priests from the tribe of Levi. He just takes anyone who wants to be ordained, he just ordains them into the priesthood.
That works out really well.
Right. So he goes against God's priesthood. He goes against God's order for worship. He sets up his own gods, and you're just like, oh. And chapter 13, you get that interesting confrontation there. The man of God comes to accuse Jeroboam. This becomes important in 2 Kings. And he comes up to Jeroboam as he's worshiping in Bethel with the golden calf and everything. And it says, you have forsaken God now too. Your house is going to come to ruin and all of that. And this altar is going to be desecrated one day. Jeroboam says, seize him. And as he says that, his hand, shrivels up and he can't bring it back. It's all shriveled up. So he has him pray and things like that. And we're even told Josiah by name. So the man says there's going to be a man named Josiah, which is King Josiah himself. He's going to come and ruin this place, which he will in 2 Kings. And we get a reference back to this. This poor prophet disobeys too, we'll find out, which is the first indicator in this book that this time period is now going to go in two ways. There's the kings on one hand, and there's the prophets on the other. And we're going to see this with Elijah. We're going to see it with Isaiah and Jeremiah and Amos and Habakkuk and all of them. That God now has this check and balance in place where the kings of Israel and Judah, they are not the end-all be-all. He has the prophet to kind of come in and say, knock it off. And the prophets are just a huge thorn in the king's side. On the other hand, for the prophets, so they don't get a big head, they're often persecuted and downtrodden and rejected and things like that. And so we're going to see these two powers kind of conflict and collide here. So now at this point, we have the two kingdoms that are at war, and they're often going to be at war with each other too. So it's not just like we don't really like you. They're actively fighting at each other too.
So this is when we start kind of getting a few of the list of this king of Judah, this king of Israel, if they did evil in the eyes of the Lord, if they did good in the eyes of the Lord, if they were like David, if they're like Jeroboam.
Right.
Eventually we find Jeroboam's line gets
crushed,
and then who killed him takes over, and then someone kills that guy's line and takes over, and so the northern kingdom isn't one long dynasty like the southern kingdom.
I think, like I said, it's 9 dynasties in the northern kingdom.
So it's not like this consistent father to son, son. In the southern kingdom, it is.
Yeah. So the kingdom of Judah will always follow a son of David, and they'll always do that.
But the northern kingdom's just kind of, a lot of times, whoever kills the guy before him.
Yeah. And sometimes there's one guy who burns down the whole palace, kind of takes the whole kingdom with him.
Yeah.
If I can't be king, no one else is going to rule here. So we're going to see, just the, political atrocities that are going to happen here are terrifying.
Yeah. So you get other kings from the area kind of coming into this play too a little bit.
And so now this kind of starts flashing forward. So the first half of this book here has been very kind of slow. It's been setting up all these themes, the temple, King Solomon, the line of David, the divided kingdom, and now it starts picking up pace. This has been taken so far into 900 BCs. Well, by the end of this book of 2 Kings, we're going to be in 585 BC. So the next 400 years is the time frame of this book here. And so it starts really picking up pace. It doesn't really focus in on what the kings do. It just kind of summarizes their reigns, gives them whether they're good or bad, and maybe highlight.
Now the rest of the acts and all that he did, are they not written in the book of whatever, the Chronicles of the King of Israel, the Chronicles of the King of Judah?
Yeah. Which, don't you wish you had those resources? That'd be kind of cool.
They probably burnt down or something at some point.
Right. So to only have those sources.
They were probably in the temple in 70 AD when Jerusalem was sacked.
Could have been. So this is one of those things, like maybe one day an archaeological discovery will be found.
Cool.
And it's the record of the kings of Israel and Judah.
That would be really cool.
So that would be kind of something to have. The kings have annals, right? They have records that they keep. Yeah. These are stuff that, later on, King Josiah can say, go look up the records of, my great-great-grandfather and see what he did. So this is stuff that is readily available that whoever's writing this has access to. So probably a prophet or someone in the king's court.
And then we get to Ahab.
Okay, so you get to, you flash forward, it kind of goes back from Israel to Judah, some of the kings back and forth there, Baasha, all of this stuff. And it finally leads us to chapter 17 is important because you do get Elijah is introduced as well. But you do get Ahab, and Ahab is kind of your quintessential northern kingdom of Israel king.
And partially because of who he married, Jezebel.
Right, Jezebel.
Jezebel becomes a major figure here.
So Ahab, we were told that he does more evil than all of the kings who have come before him. And I love it. And it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam. He took his wife Jezebel, on top of that. And Jezebel, we'll hear more about her, but she's kind of some of the worst of the worst.
Served Baal, erected an altar for Baal and a house for Baal.
Yeah. And we're also told that Ahab rebuilds the city of Jericho.
Which we saw that back in Joshua, that if you rebuild Jericho...
Verse 34 of chapter 16
where is it? He laid the foundations at the cost of his firstborn and set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, which was the curse, basically, that was laid upon after they destroyed Jericho and Joshua.
Yeah.
said this would happen, and that's what happened.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, was this kind of like a supernatural? His 2 sons all of a sudden died? Or was this something that he knew that curse and he's like, well, I'll pay that price, and so he kills his 2 sons?
Well, Baal.
Maybe.
Well, no, that was Moloch.
Milcom here, but they were worshiping them too.
Yeah,
so.
from the worship of Moloch was sacrificing your children.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, we get the character of Ahab, and now we get Elijah the prophet who's brought in.
A couple of interesting stories. These are also kind of Sunday school lessons too.
And these are used by Jesus as an example because Elijah gets sent to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
And Jesus will liken his ministry. You know how when Elijah was walking around, he didn't go to any of the Israelites. He went to the Gentiles. And that's what in Luke chapter 4 gets everyone all upset and angry because Jesus is suggesting in his day that you're all not going to listen to me, but the Gentiles will.
Which is what happens. Acts, but,
yeah. So you just kind of love that. So Elijah does a few miracles here.
Yeah. First, there's the famine that's going on.
Yep.
And he basically escapes from Ahab because Ahab would probably have killed him goes to the widow of Zarephath.
Yeah.
Where we get where the widow's basically like, we don't have enough food to survive, her and her son, and Elijah's like, your jar of oil will not run out, and the wheat won't run out. Basically, they won't run out of food during the entire famine.
Yeah.
So again, God's provision.
Feeding the 5,000, which contrasts what we just got done reading with Solomon, who has all of this food and all of this stuff coming in. You're thinking, oh, wouldn't that be nice? But here, these women are just living off the provision of God, and God continues to provide for them.
There's a lesson there for us.
Yes, there is. He even raises the widow's son from the dead. So this is the first story, I think, in the Old Testament that accounts of a resurrection happening here. So Elijah does a lot of signs that Jesus himself is going to do, which kind of this is why Elijah meets with Jesus on the mount, because it's like, oh yeah, Elijah did all these things, but now Jesus has been doing all these things. What does this mean? Jesus' ministry is greater.
Well, isn't it, Elijah's also, John the Baptist is the Elijah that is to come.
Yeah.
Because
comes in the spirit of Elijah. Yeah. Which is what Elisha will ask for. I wish for the spirit of Elijah, right, which is what John the Baptist will get. So of course this sets up in chapter 18 then. Elijah and Ahab they finally conflict here. There's a confrontation and they meet up. So Ahab and Elijah meet up, and there's this famous account in chapter 18.
It's actually kind of funny when you really think about it.
The Prophets of Baal, this is another Sunday school lesson. But it's perhaps, it is worth stopping and kind of noting here. There's 450 prophets of Baal. So there's Elijah on one side, and he's like, let's have a worship service, is what Elijah says. Let's do this. Let's have a sacrifice. So he has his end, and they have 450 prophets, and the goal here is they each have a calf, and they'll offer a sacrifice, and what they'll do is that God needs to provide the fire. And so he says, call out to Baal, call out to your gods, and the 450 prophets, they're dancing, they're singing, they're throwing a huge fit. At some point, they start slicing themselves, for blood, because maybe God will get Baal's attention. And what do you know? Do you notice anything kind of interesting about all that?
Well, it's just because what is it? Doesn't Elijah say something like, well, maybe he's like relieving? Yeah, he's relieving himself, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep. And apparently, there is the mythology of Baal where the priest had to go and like basically do everything for Baal and wake him up and all that stuff, and that he sometimes was in the underworld and so he could be reached. And that's when there were famines or something like that.
Right.
And so Elijah's basically taunting them and being like, well, should he be, you just have to shout louder and he'll hear you, and and it doesn't work, of course.
Right. And they do this, and from midday past, they raved until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention.
And then, of course, Elijah.
He's like, all right, everyone come here, and he makes it even harder for him. He's like, pour water 3 times, dig a trench, put water on the sacrifice. You're like, okay, this thing's not going to catch fire. So there's no, someone's underneath it, lighting the fuse here and getting the fire going. And finally, Elijah just says a prayer, right? He does one prayer at the time of oblation. Elijah the prophet, he comes near, prays to God. God, I know you are God. Make yourself known. And then before the prayer's even done, God, boom, fire from heaven, and consumes up the water even.
And the wood, and the stones, and the dust.
And the dust. So it's a total, sacrifice. And if there was God's making a statement here,
Yeah.
a very clear statement. And then Elijah says, seize those prophets because they're false prophets. They're leading the people astray. Kill them all. And of course, this gets Jezebel angry because this is her favorite god that Elijah has just mocked and scorned and won. God has won this battle against. And we get some famous stories here. But what sticks out here about the next section of what happens to Elijah after the prophets of Baal?
Well, there's the whole Elijah basically runs off into the desert outside of Beersheba. Wondered if was that the same wilderness that Jesus would have been in during the temptation?
Perhaps.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if because that had to have been around the same area. But anyway, and he basically is like, take my life because, all the prophets are dead, which all the prophets aren't dead, but Jezebel's trying to kill all the
He's
prophets.
being dramatic. Pastors are never dramatic, are they?
Yeah, never. Should we ask Rebecca about that?
I'm sure she'd have some thoughts.
Anyway, yeah, an angel tells him to get up and eat, and there's God provides for him 2 water and a cake. And then he, the food is enough for him to go 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb.
Yeah, so he runs in Horeb. Where's Horeb, of course? Do you remember what Horeb is?
I can't remember all my mountains.
It's Mount Sinai.
Oh, Mount
So
Sinai is Horeb.
he goes back to where it all began, right? Where the old covenant began as Mount Sinai, which is also called Horeb.
So he went all the way,
Yeah,
whoa, because Mount Sinai is way south of Israel.
right. So he went on quite a journey. So he's at Mount Sinai, and then maybe in the same spot where the Lord had met with Moses, perhaps. He's in kind of a cave there, lodged inside, and God calls to him, and this is the famous, the storm passes.
People
the winds,
use this as
and they've used this all the time, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the whole, God is going to speak to you in the still small voice, and you have to listen carefully and hear it, and
Right,
that's not how God has promised to speak to us.
right. Yeah, well, while he might have done this with Elijah, it's not how he's going to talk to us.
Yeah.
So finally, what are you doing here, Elijah? That's what God said. What's going on? And then he repeats this thing. I've been very jealous for you, but the people of Israel have forsaken you, and I'm the only one left. So just kill me. Just kind of just end this. And so I love what the Lord says to him here, and what's kind of the summary of what God tells Elijah.
Basically, what does it go to? Did you go on your way to Damascus? And then you anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. Jehu, son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel. And then Elisha is going to be your a prophet in your place.
I love it. You're going to retire Elijah, is kind of what he says. Go anoint this guy, and your replacement.
Yeah.
And what a thing for God to say. And
So we get the call of Elisha then.
Right, and I do love the end, talking about he's saying, I'm the only one left, God. There's no one else who worships you but me. And God says, don't worry, I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. So God has retained for himself people who believe.
There's a remnant again.
Which
There's
tells
always
us
a remnant.
Who saves people? God. So who keeps people from falling into idolatry? God does.
It's also a good reminder for the church that even if it seems like
It's over.
no one believes anymore, and there's always someone.
There is, yeah. God keeps someone for himself. So he does go find Elisha. This was my ordination sermon text, actually. And go back. I love that because Elisha, he goes up to him, right, and says, you're now going to be a prophet, so follow me. And Elisha's like, can I go say goodbye to mom and dad first? And Elijah grants it to him, says, yeah, what have I done to you? Sure, go ahead, go back. Which, is the opposite of what Jesus does. He doesn't allow people to go back to their mother and father, which tells you that the ministry of Jesus is more urgent than what Elijah is doing here. And so there's that. So he's picked up. And then it goes back to Ahab. Ahab has a war here. Ahab's, fighting enemies. And just kind of interesting. We get into... it's always a weird account. Sometimes we'll read it in Old Testament, the Naboth's vineyard here in chapter 21, which breaks a lot of Old Testament law here. Jezebel does, because this is Naboth's vineyard. It belongs to him and his family.
Yeah, which
and
I know we think that maybe Naboth is being like, petty here, where, oh, why can't you just sell your land? But he's like, this is his part of the inheritance in the promised land. Is this plot of land?
Why would he sell that?
There was the whole thing in was it Deuteronomy with the person who only had 5 daughters, and they were supposed to marry within their clans, and so because of otherwise their property would go off to other clans, and so he's actually being faithful here.
Yeah. So because he recognizes the gift that God has given, that this is part of the blessings that God was going to give them this land. So he's like, why would I want to sell my inheritance for a couple bucks? That's what he's thinking. My family's lived on this land for 600 years.
Yeah,
why would I give this up?
Ahab really, really wants it. He covets.
Yep, he covets. And so Jezebel has Naboth put to death and stoned. And then Jezebel says, hey, the land's up for grabs. And he's like, oh, good. And it's almost like a David and Bathsheba recounting here in a sense. And the Lord, we find out the Lord condemns Ahab for this. And I love the interaction between Elijah and Ahab, because Ahab, you can tell they just don't really like each other at all, and they have to put up with each other at times. And it's just kind of interesting. There's false prophets that Ahab has that God has to deal with, because Ahab and Jehoshaphat in chapter 22, they have to come together because they have a common enemy, and so it's kind of a time of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we're against each other. We're brothers, right? We're the people of God. So we'll align ourselves together. Ahab has some thoughts about putting Jehoshaphat to death here.
Doesn't he have Ahab goes into battle disguised
dressed as a king, and
Jehoshaphat? Ahab disguised Jehoshaphat looks like a king, and so the enemy is like, oh, there's the king of Israel, and then when they realize it's not the king of Israel, they back off, and Jehoshaphat survives, whereas Ahab is struck by a random arrow.
I love that. Ahab thinks, I'm going to hide, and so when the battle happens, no one's going to look for me because I'm hiding, and some random guy just happens to just randomly shoot an arrow, and it kills Ahab.
Well, and again, the prophet, he had all the happy prophet, it brings to mind the whole, they'll put around people who tell them what their itching ears want to hear.
Right.
And it's kind of the thing where he has all these prophets who are telling him, oh yeah, you'll, survive, you'll beat this guy, and then the one, what's his name? That's here, right?
Micaiah.
Yeah,
Micaiah
and
here.
He's like, no, don't get him because he always just speaks
against
me. And it's like,
I love that.
He's like, and Micaiah says, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me, and he does not return in peace because he dies.
Yeah, in fact, I think this will also play out later too. But I'm trying to see if it happens here. It's that Micaiah actually speaks sarcastically. So in chapter 22, verse 15, when he came to the king said to him, Micaiah, shall we go to Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain? And he answered, go up in triumph. The Lord will give it into your hand of the king. And which is exactly what the prophet's been saying. So he comes in, just mimics them, mocking. And he's like, what did I tell you? You should speak the truth. And he's like, fine. You're going to go up and you're going to die, Ahab. And see, did I not tell you that he never says anything good to me? So but then Ahab dies in battle. We get told about Jehoshaphat. We're told about Azariah picking up after Ahab here. And then the book of 1 Kings comes to an end.
Which is sort of an arbitrary distinction.
Yeah.
Here it's just kind of Ahab dies, so this is where we're going to split the book kind of thing, it seems like.
Yep. So this is the halfway points of the book of Kings. And that's where 1 Kings comes to an end. Next week, when we'll get together, we'll talk about Proverbs, having spoken about Solomon here. And then we'll pick up again with 2 Kings after that. Which 2 Kings will conclude the story that has been building since Joshua.
Because people get exiled.
Yep. Everything that has been either promised or cursed happens in the book of 2 Kings and comes to an ending.
Because we're almost actually done with the history of the Old Testament. We got First and Second Chronicles, because that just repeats the stories of kings, and then of course Ezra and Nehemiah, which is return from exile, and then we get into all the we'll get into wisdom literature and prophets. All
the prophets. So we'll have some good stuff. That'd be probably different kind in terms of subject material, because the prophets kind of have a different rhythm to them than the historical stuff does. Even then from like Paul's letters, because those even have like a logic to them too, where the prophets just kind of have like prophecies, and they kind of speak on God's behalf. So you almost kind of get the story behind the prophets to kind of understand what's going on with them.
And where because a lot of the prophets fit into certain historical events going on here. So,
and that's a good thing to remember too, that as the book of Kings is happening, the books of the prophets are also happening.
Because some of them are actually mentioned in
Yeah.
I think in Second Kings and in the Chronicles.
I
where
think
you'll
Micah is brought in at
you'll
one
get
point.
names and they'll be like,
Yep.
oh, hey, is that? And yeah, it is.
Jeremiah is brought in. I will see Isaiah here too. So yeah, they actually become, they're real people. So it's not surprising, but they actually show up in the narrative
history.
count too. So which it's all tied in together. So we'll see that here, especially in the book of 2 Kings, but it is also starting to happen right about now. Elijah is probably one of the first of the major prophets here, but he's not a written prophet. We don't have a book of Elijah in our Bibles because he didn't write anything.
But his, we get like the most like history of his life and what he did.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
which maybe is why he's the prophet that's mentioned more in the Gospels.
Probably. Yeah. Because he's kind of like the spirit that all the other prophets kind of follow in.
Yeah.
So, like Hosea and Isaiah, they all kind of follow in his train in that sense. So when you think of, especially in Jesus' day, when people thought of Elijah, like, oh yeah, he's like one of the first of the prophets. He would have been like, the prophet that kind of came to mind.
So is that why maybe we get Moses and Elijah? Because Moses was the first
Right.
lawgiver, law keeper, judge, basically.
Yeah.
And whereas Elijah is kind of the first prophet. I mean, we've obviously had like Nathan before this and Samuel, but
Yeah.
this is like the prophet.
The guy, yeah. And like we said, there's no other no one casts a longer shadow in the Old Testament than Moses. So if there's anyone that should be surpassing, that Jesus should surpass, it's Moses himself. So kind of interesting as we plow through the Old Testament here. Any other thoughts, though, that kind of stick out to you?
I think that covered it pretty well.
Yeah, we had to fly through
Kings
some
are always
parts of there,
interesting,
but
well, yeah, you get into some of the random stories, and you're
Right.
like, what the heck? But
we could spend a lot of time there. But like I said, the major points is Solomon, the temple, and how that now is going to play out in the rest of the book, especially now with the divided monarchy and divided kingdom. So, yeah. And we'll see its sorry ending here in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So we'll finish it then. All right, well then we'll stop for today. Let's have a closing prayer, and then we'll have our blessing as we usually are. Dear God, Heavenly Father, thank you for your word, the word which tells us of the wisdom of Solomon, but also of his folly. Lord, as we see these stories played out in the Old Testament, let them be a witness to us too, that they would speak into our hearts and our minds, not to follow in the same steps that they did, but in the steps of your Son, Jesus Christ. Lord, preserve for yourself a remnant, a people that will call upon you, that have not bowed down to the false gods around us, but put their trust wholly in you. Lord, grant that to us by your Holy Spirit for the sake of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. In his name we pray. Amen. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen.